Screw it. We're going live. It's early, a couple minutes early here today instead of the usual lateness. This afternoon, we had a chat over on La Rasa's channel. If you would like to go and watch that, please be my guest. Be my guest. Put our stream to the test. Yeah, we talked for a couple hours and talked about a bunch of books. There's going to be most of the stuff I talked about on the stream. There's not going to be too much to add. So if you did see that one, of course, I would love to have you here for the stream. But if you did see this afternoon's, it's probably going to be a whole bunch of replay of books that I already talked about. Talk about a couple of other things as well off the top. We're going to talk some music. I got myself a record today, which I'm pretty excited about. And I'm excited to kind of get into this band's discography, Canadian band. So we'll talk about that. What else should we talk about? What else has happened? I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and of course, because everybody's talking about it, good evening, Gore Vidal. Because everybody's talking about it, we ended up having a brief conversation about the assassination attempt of Mr. Sir Trump. And I think what I said to him was, because he said, "What do you think about it?" I said, if it came to pass that it was real, I wouldn't be surprised. If it came to pass that it was a setup, I wouldn't be surprised. If it came to pass that he set it up, I wouldn't be surprised. And I think that's kind of exactly the state of things these days. For me personally, nothing would surprise me anymore. None of it would shock me whatsoever. The whole thing looked suspicious to me, but what do I know? I don't know shit. But honestly, nothing would surprise me if whatever investigation happens, if things actually come to light or whatever that investigation yields, even if anybody even keeps talking about it, none of it would surprise me whatsoever. And then I guess this afternoon, Biden stepped down finally, which he should have done a long time ago. And it's hard not to think of things, not necessarily as conspiracies. It's hard not to think of things that the deck is stacked against you as kind of just an average everyday citizen. There wasn't a process to actually have the voters of your country vote for a Democratic nominee. It was just told that Biden was going to be it and suck it up. And now you guys down there are being told that it's going to be whoever we put in place and suck it up. And you guys aren't making that decision. And you guys don't have a say in who that nominee is going to be. And it's the Republicans that are a threat to democracy. Honestly, every single last one of you out. We're done with all of you. And I just wonder when that day is going to finally come where people start actually for real in big numbers voting third party, or you just see a mass exodus from any sort of electoral process whatsoever. I mean, the numbers across kind of North America are fairly low. Again, here as well too. None of it would surprise me anymore. I just know that day after day, the whole thing just seems more rigged than it did the day before. And it's just unfortunate when you're someone who's just struggling to get by and you feel like you don't actually have a say in your surroundings. You don't feel like you actually have a say in who governs you. It's either the fuck faces on one side or the shitheads on the other side. It's really difficult to feel like you actually have a voice. So as usual, I just encourage you to kind of, build those circles, build the community around yourself, whether that's with your family, whether it's with your neighborhood. Look for things in your scope that you can affect change. Look for things like that where you can affect change. Look for things that you can participate in where you feel like you're taking even a little step forward, and realize that on the grand scope of things, we're nothing more than a blip in the timeline, microscopic at best. And things are going to kind of continue how they'll continue. I just really hope that one day we do see people kind of wake up to things and actually band together and actually force change as opposed to ask for change. Actually participate and force a change out there, because things need to shift. And I just don't know what to think about any of it. So, I still engage with all of that stuff. I just don't really know what to add to the conversation that hasn't been added by much smarter people, and a lot of people who are just way more versed in this kind of history and this kind of topic. But I did feel like I had to say something about it, because it's a hell of a goddamn week, man. The two parties have been locked in since the end of the American Civil War. Third parties don't have a chance at all. Lower voter turnout benefits. Pardon me. Let me start that again. Lower voter turnout benefits the wealthy donors who fund the elections. Yeah. And I just don't know if I agree that third parties don't have a chance at all. I think that given time, I'm not saying in this election, I'm saying like down the line, I do feel like there's a chance. Again, like looking to Canada, looking to your neighbors to the north here. Yes, the NDP hasn't won federally, but the NDP is in power currently here within my province, and they are the third party, and they have been the third party for a long time. Now, saying that though, of course, generally they support the Liberals kind of more so than the Conservatives. They do stray from that party. I do feel like there's a chance, and I feel like one of the ways of having that chance is kind of continuing to wake people up to the fact that the two parties aren't benefiting you. Now, one of the things that you guys do kind of suffer from, again, from a total outsider's point, so please take this with a huge grain of salt. I'm not here to lecture or anything. The third party options that you have down there don't seem to have much teeth. I do like Jill Stein. I do think that she says some interesting things. I don't know if I would particularly support her. She doesn't seem like that party, the Green Party, doesn't seem like it's a party that's really taking things serious as far as actually shooting for the presidency. But I also sometimes wonder, how important is that at the end of the day? Is it something where you have that power that you have as a third party and can still affect change in other ways, just not on that grand kind of scale for the entire country? Historically in the US, they don't. That's what I mean. Okay, understood. At a different time, the Trumpers would have been a third party, but they've taken over the Republican Party. Yeah, and I think that comes from just the dissatisfaction of a lot of people with their political system, that they were brought in from Trump and his used car salesman bullshit, because again, like some of the things that I've heard him say, it seems to me that his opinion on some things changes depending on which way the wind blows. I personally don't feel like he's any better or any worse than Joe Biden or the Democratic Party. Again, personal opinions here on this channel. I don't see one being worse than the other. They're both fucking horrible. They're both going to keep Israel decimating Gaza. They both are going to continue not benefiting the people that they claim to be fighting for. I mean, Trump didn't use that. He didn't use that power to get any benefits for anybody. And I find it laughable that even now people are saying that Biden was the most pro-labor president you've ever had. It's just horseshit. Literally stopping strikes from happening. Like, it's unfucking believable that anyone would believe that stuff. And I think that's the thing that's the most disheartening and kind of frustrating, that you see all these instances where the true colors have been shown, and you still have people buying into it, and you still have people claiming that all of these things, that you're this, you're that, and the other thing, if you don't kind of toe the line. And it's just really unfortunate. And again, I point to kind of the younger generation. It seems like they have a different lens on things for the most part. Of course, there's still people that toe the line. It's always going to be the case. I would like to hope that there's some change with that new generation where they see through a lot of that bullshit. But I mean, again, it's the stuff that happens in the States. at this point still has a pretty big effect on all of us, especially us here in Canada. So, I mean, that's also why we end up following it here. First of all, we're inundated with it, but second of all, it does actually affect us. You know, like we share a border. It does really affect us. We kind of lockstep into whatever the United States does, which is a whole separate issue. The last pro-labor president was Johnson. Even though he came from Texas, a right-to-work state. Yeah, right. So keeping with those borders, we're going to talk about some Canadian music to kind of completely go off of that topic there. Thank you, Gore Vidal, for your input on that. I do really appreciate it. And I hope I don't sound too preachy, like the Canadian just telling you guys you're all fucked, even though sometimes I feel like it. I hope that doesn't necessarily come through. I don't mean it to. If it does, I don't mean it to kind of be talking down to anybody. It's just depressing sometimes seeing the state of things and seeing people kind of go along with some things without putting the least little bit of work into thinking about what they're supporting. It's just kind of depressing because there's very real world consequences out there. What was the last number? 180,000 potentially dead in Gaza. You know what I mean? Like, that's a fucking lot of people that are suffering from decisions that the United States and Canada and the UK are kind of making, that's actually affecting people's lives and generations of their lives. It's just really sad, man. It's really fucking sad. Free Palestine. Fuck. God damn it. It's pain in the ass. So to completely change the topic. So I've been listening to Voivod. You don't, Terrence. I personally know people here who feel the same and are friends of mine. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Gore. So Voivod is kind of an infamous Canadian band. This is an album from 2018. They did a reissue in 2024 that has some fancy colored vinyl. Made a couple of bucks helping out a buddy of mine put some stuff up on Marketplace. So very wisely used that little bit to buy myself a record. It's a double LP. It's on colored vinyl. It's 3 sides. So the 4th side is etched, which is kind of cool. So there's the look at the record itself. And then there is, let's get it this way. There you can see, I think you can see it says Voivod there and one of the characters. So Voivod are an infamous Canadian. They're like a cross between kind of prog rock, metal. I don't even know really how to describe them. They come from kind of a metal background. They're originally from Montreal. They are French. 1982, they're out of Jonquière, Quebec. And they were influenced by kind of hardcore progressive rock and the new wave of British heavy metal. They put out a ton of albums. They've been a band that's always been around in my life on the peripherals. I never really got into them deeply, but recently I've started hearing some of their music again and have been really interested in kind of their history. I'll pull up the channel. There's a picture. There's only 2 original members still in here. The singer, Snake, and then the drummer, Away. And the drummer, Away, is the guy who's responsible for all the art. He was heavily influenced by Heavy Metal magazine, specifically Drouillet. It seems like Drouillet was a big influence on him. So he started kind of having these dreams and these kind of visions in his dreams, and he would wake up and create this whole world. So his art, Away's art, is all over the Voivod releases. So let's share a page here and we'll just kind of look through, and then I'll get to the comments here in 1 second. Sorry, everything is very wobbly these days because I've got a new chair and it's really changed my setup here. So here we are. Here's the page. Here's a look at them. So many instances where they came on my radar. There was one really infamous where they had kind of a minor hit. They did a version of Pink Floyd's Astronomy Domine. and it became it was played a hell of a lot on Much Music, on like the metal shows and stuff, and it really did wonders for them. They actually got in touch with David Gilmour to ask permission, even though Gilmour wasn't in the band when the original was out. They wanted to do a cover of the live version that was on Amagama, I think, of Astronomy Domine. So they called and asked his permission, and he gave them a blessing, and it really did. It did a lot for them. It really kind of spiked their kind of popularity within the kind of metal community. But like I said, they were always around in my years of listening to music. They've had a bunch of different lineups. The original guitarist, who was one of the founding members, he died, I think, in 2000. Yeah, I think it's 2005, and was replaced by this guy, Dan Chewy Mongrain on guitar, who was he played in a bunch of other bands that I really like. One of them being another Canadian band called Gorguts, who had an album called Obscura that was just a mind-blowing album for us when we heard Obscura, that we hadn't heard anything like it. Like it was more extreme metal, like death metal, but it was really weird. It was really technical, and it was just odd. If you're into metal and you don't know that Gorguts album, I'd encourage you to check it out, at least sample it just to hear what I'm talking about. It's a very strange album. Now, this Dan did not play on that particular album, but he did play with Gorguts. He also played with another very influential band for me musically, a band called Virus. Virus was a Swedish band that came out of another band called Vedbwen's End, which we'll look at in 1 second. I'll talk about them. So this is all this is just to kind of give you a sense of their art style. They had a character. One of the things that they were drawn to was Iron Maiden, and they loved how Eddie became like a character of the band. So they created this world and created these characters within this Voivod universe, and they would do entire albums based on these characters, really kind of sci-fi and things. So I've started in the last couple of days, I've started to kind of I just listened to this Warren Payne last night, actually. I'm starting to go through their records and just listen to stuff just to really immerse myself. And I'm kind of taken by it, how much it reminds me of like Vedbwen's End and Virus, who obviously came after these guys. So I'm assuming the influence has gone. Voivod influenced them as opposed to vice versa. But really, really great stuff. And like I said, it's just the early stuff like that Warren Payne, this Roar album, are very much steeped in kind of like that thrash and heavy metal and speed metal, but you can tell that there's something different about it. Like there's just something different that they're doing. I mean, look at this fucking album cover. That's unbelievable. And just calling the album Roar on its own is pretty great. So there's a look at them there. So I'm actually really excited to kind of dive into these guys. I'm going to look for lyrics online so I can follow along with the stories and things. I've started kind of hitting up some of the used record shops in town here, which there are very, very few of them, just to see if anybody has any old Voivod cassettes. This is the other album. This Dimension Hatros is kind of cited by fans of Voivod as one of their best. And this is very much a concept album about this character and kind of what happens to this character here. And more to that, I can't really speak to because I just don't know that history. But there's a lot here to unpack, I think. So I'm looking forward to digging in to just see what this world that they've created has in store for me. Famously, Dave Grohl is a huge fan of Voivod and has been a huge fan since the 80s. He had a side project called Probot, and I think there was an appearance by members of Voivod on one of the songs on that Probot album. Nothing Faces another one that's cited as a highlight album from them as well. So there's a look at more of Away's art. As far as I know, Away never did any kind of full-blown comics, but you can absolutely see the style of, or the influence of comics in general and heavy metal and things specifically in all the artwork that comes with these albums, which is the other reason why I'd like to get the physical copies. I'd like to sit and have the artwork in front of me so I can really digest it. It's funny, but I've been considering buying a turntable. That ended after the difficult move. Comics, books, and now record albums. No way, not again. Yeah, I can totally see that, Gore. You've had a hell of a move there by the sounds of things. I thought that looked Druyer too. Yeah, absolutely. You can really see the influence there. So, one of the bands that really kind of sounds like Voivod to me is this Vedbuen's End, but more specifically, this band called Virus. And when I was looking them up last night, I was surprised to see that there were still albums from Virus up to a couple of years ago. So there's a couple of albums that I haven't even heard from them. I really do dig Virus quite a bit, but this Vedbuen's End is such a phenomenal album. It is another, like, when I started getting into kind of a little more strange and avant-garde black metal, when I heard this Vedbuen's End, I was kind of sold immediately. It's just, for a black metal album, it is so different. There's not really any artwork inside, just lyrics. So different, with these blazing and blistering moments of very raw black metal, but most of the album sounds like a prog rock album to some degree. So a really interesting mix. And I listened to this when I discovered this album. It was, again, one of those infamous albums that was just on replay for me. I listened to it over and over again. I think we were living in Ontario at that time, so we're talking like 25 years ago when I discovered this. When did this originally come out? I think I've got their page open, and then we'll get to comics here. So Written in Waters originally came out in 1995, and then I've got a record upstairs to Those Who Caress the Pale. It's a reprint of that album because that album is 1994. So I've got kind of a reissue of that one. They only did those albums. I think they probably did some, they were appeared on some, yeah, it looks like they appeared on some compilations, but Discogs doesn't even have any singles from them. So they just did those two albums. The main guy behind it was the drummer of Vedbuen's End. He went on, and drummer and lyricist rather, and wrote the songs. He's the one who kind of went off to Virus, took up the guitar and songwriting duties on that one. They've got a couple of Bandcamp pages to check out. So the band is Virus. Really, really good stuff. If you're into any of that kind of, if any of that sounds a little bit appealing to you, I'd suggest checking it out. And like I said, absolutely check out Gorguts Obscura and kind of try to wrap your head around some of that stuff, because it's like nothing I've heard, especially when you really get into genres and when there's bands that kind of are part of that genre but start breaking down those barriers and bringing other things to it. I find that very, very appealing. So anyway, that's the music for today. I'll start with this because my daughter and I were just reading this tonight. Actually, I'll put that there so it doesn't fall down. I decided to read Usagi Yojimbo with my daughter, this book one. Hello, Daryl D. We read there was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Usagi Yojimbo comic that I had that we read together, and she kind of enjoyed it. So I asked her if she'd be interested in this. So we started tonight. We read the first 3 chapters. So good. At times difficult to read aloud, especially this early Usagi stuff. So as just a quick update, so this is the book that I bought from Lone Star Comics. I went back and put a comment in the description there about what happened with this. So I did contact my comic shop, or Lone Star, and said, hey, I just wanted to bring to your attention, this is the book I got. There's nothing wrong with the book. It's just the listing said first printing. This is a second. and I just kind of left it open for them to see if they would do anything. They ended up nicely giving me a full refund on this book and saying, keep the book as a gift. Apologies for the confusion, which was super, super nice of them. It's not what I expected. The only thing I said to them, I said, normally I wouldn't really mind first printing, second printing. It's just that for me, this book was expensive. It came out to, what was it, $38 US or something. It was $51 Canadian is what it came out to, that's a big chunk of change for a comic, you know, in my estimation. Even though it's a beautiful book and it's in really nice shape. So super nice of them to give me a full refund on this book. I immediately turned around and used that money to cover the shipping to send them another box of comics for trade. I sent them 30 something books. The estimated trade value of the books is $115 US. So then that's, again, like they have to grade them and see. So I'm sure it's going to be less than that, but that's kind of like the top end. It'll be $114 and change in trade rather. So I feel like that was a good use of money. The money I spent on this book was trade from a previous one. They turned around and gave me cash in my bank. So I figured, you know, return the favor, send them a bunch of books. The postage ended up not costing me anything because of that. I used FedEx, and I think it cost about $46 Canadian to send a big box to them. So I feel like that's a deal, especially if I do get like that $100 in trade credit from them. I will gladly use that sometime later this year, probably sooner than later, knowing myself. But there you have it. So we started reading this one, $51 madness. Yeah, it's absolute madness. But again, the only reason I bought it is because it was trade value. Like I wouldn't have spent actual money on it. I just feel like it was too good to pass up. I would like the other volumes as well, too, of this Fantagraphics stuff. So one of the things I also didn't say in that video, in the inside, it does say the stories in this volume originally appeared in various issues of Albedo, Critters, Doomsday Squad, and the Usagi Yojimbo Summer Special. So that's where this stuff appeared. So we have the first story, I think, that was the very first Usagi Yojimbo story from Albedo. The Goblin of Adakigahara, I believe is how you pronounce that. Famous, kind of infamous story. Recently, it was colorized in an issue of Doomsday Squad, and then recently they did, Stan Sakai did an updated version of this one in color. We've talked about it before. One of the things I was talking about in the stream was, I'll get to it in a minute, reading an issue of Gru that I picked up. Like, look at these pages. So good. Really, really great. And I was just commenting on, like Usagi Yojimbo, Gru is one of those books where I feel like you can pick up any issue and just really get a nice story. In the case of Gru, a very comedic story. And then I also felt it was interesting because Sakai kind of works on both books, doing the lettering on Gru, doing everything here in Usagi. It makes it feel like they're both from the same world, and was pleasantly surprised to see this panel tonight when we were reading as they're walking through town heading to Edo. We see Gru on the street, and Usagi is thinking, we are nearing Edo. If Hikiji attacks again, it will be soon. And then he looks over at Gru and says, ugly barbarian, in his head. And Gru is looking at him and saying, stupid samurai. So that was a really, really great little cameo in this book. A real nice surprise. Gave me a nice laugh there. So just great. It was fun reading it with her. I think she was interested. I was interested in reading it. It's not one that I find reads the best out loud, kind of reading to your kids, especially this early stuff where they're doing a lot of introduction of who the character is, introduction of new characters that are going to play a part in Usagi's life throughout the series, introduction to the different leaders, introduction to the Shogun, all of this kind of history within. So it wasn't the smoothest to read out loud, but it was still good. And when you're hit with panels like this, it's just nice to kind of have these moments to just sit and reflect on one of the panels. There's another one as well here. Yeah, it was the end of this story. That was just a good moment. Let's see, where is it? Right here. Yeah, so the very last panel where Usagi is finally leaving this kind of this young lord, his service, and they just go off on this one ride together. It's him and what's her name again? Tomo Ami, right? Tomoeame is her name. I think that's how you pronounce it. So they have kind of one final moment together as he rides out, which is just a really nice illustration. So yeah, I think that's going to be fun. We'll continue on with this. Me and Lillian will read this together. I'm looking forward to eventually getting some more of these. And even though they're smaller books, they're not kind of standard trade paperback size. It's still a really nice format, and that black and white is beautiful. This afternoon, For the Love of Comics had a live stream where he was talking about a bunch of books. I didn't catch all of it. I just caught a little piece of it before I was going out. And he mentions Usagi Yojimbo, and there's some people in the chat that are saying, should I start with the black and white or should I start with the color? And my response to those kind of things all the time is it really depends on you as a reader. Do you like black and white comics or do you like color comics? Whichever one you like, I would say start with those. Whichever ones you prefer, start with those, just so you can have something that's one less barrier to get into the story. Don't feel like you have to. There's sometimes this feeling, I think, that you have to read the black and white stuff because that's like the legitimate stuff. And I don't think that. I prefer black and white over color, but there's so many good color comics that we look at here on this channel and that are just out there. And even the new Usagi stuff, the color is great in it. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. It's just my personal preference, black and white versus color. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. So that's often my response to those things. Do you like color work or do you like black and white work? Whichever one you like, start with that one, and then you'll get into the story pretty easily. But so if you're not subscribed to For the Love of Comics, go and check out his channel. I plan to eventually go back and watch the rest of that live stream to see what else he talked about. I think he talks about Brew Breakers Friday in that. He talks about the book Dungeon as well. So yeah, it's good stuff. Saying hello here. I agree with you. If it grabs you, read it. Absolutely. Haven't read any Usagi Yojimbo, but I see the appeal. The art looks fantastic, and the samurai genre is dope. Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're a samurai genre fan, this will appeal to you as well. This wandering samurai, these wandering character stories, I think, just are just so open to so many amazing short stories that can happen because there's nothing tying them down to one particular storyline. It's just this personal journey and interactions with people. And this early stuff, the thing that I would say about going back to this early stuff is, again, like just my personal, I find it so enjoyable to follow an artist throughout their career and see their style change throughout their career. And with Usagi, you can really see that happen. If you compare this book to some of the new stuff coming out, you can see his style has changed quite a bit, even in just kind of how he structures a character. And I love that kind of thing. I love seeing that progression through someone's career. So that's also why going back to this stuff really appeals to me. I like to see where stuff has come from. I like to see, were they a little rough and rusty at the beginning, or was it kind of set in stone right out of the gate? And I would say for the most part, he really had a good sense of things, even early stages of what he wanted to do with this character. So it's going to be a fun one to read. So then let's try to find that Gru comic that I read. So this was from 204 Comics here in town. They've got a lot of dollar bins and 50-cent bins. I think this issue was in the dollar bin. It's from the Dark Horse Maverick line. It was a 4-issue miniseries, And hello, Chaos and Comics. How the hell are you? It was from January 2000, so it's Grew Mightier Than the Sword. And it was the only issue they had from this 4 issues. I haven't read a Grew comic in a long time. My brother was a huge Grew fan. He had a ton of the comics. I've got some scattered issues here and there from Pacific as well as from Marvel. I've got I think I'm missing just one of like the Grew Chronicles that kind of collected that stuff. So I hadn't read this and I hadn't even seen it. So I figured I'd just kind of dip into it, and it was really just enjoyable. Again, like people say about Usagi, you can dive in anywhere. It's exactly the same with Grew. You don't need to start at the beginning. You don't need to kind of know the entire history of this character. You can just pick any single story and just jump into it. And I think the thing that I loved about this issue was just kind of the goofy humor in it. He has a misunderstanding of just basic kind of language. He goes into this, he wants food. He's hungry. So he's going into this bar, this little inn, and he sees someone saying to the innkeeper that he's ready to order. And he says, "I'll have what that man is having." And the innkeeper says, "An excellent choice, sir." And of course, Grew says the same thing. "Hey, that is a great idea. I'm going to have what this guy's having, but I'm going to get to it first." So he takes it as a literal, he wants the food that guy is having. So Grew starts eating his meal, and then he starts drinking other people's drinks, saying the same thing, like, I'm going to have what he's having to drink. So just like stupidly funny use of kind of jokes within the English language, I think was really, really clever there. So, not much else to say about it. There's a character in here that I'm sure people will know who has a history with Grew. It's not a name that I recognized. I haven't read enough of it to kind of know this universe very well, but he's on his deathbed and he's had a lot of issues with Grew over the past. And he's looking to name one of his sons as his heir to the throne. And basically the way that they're going to prove themselves is whoever is the one that can kill Grew will be the heir to the throne. So it kind of jumps off from that point. And of course, Grew gets in on the action thinking that he's joining. They don't know who he is. He's joining up this army. He needs some money, not knowing that they're going actually looking for him. It's just like, it's like a Three's Company episode, just in a samurai kind of setting in a comic book. So it was really good fun. I really enjoyed this one. So I'll be keeping my eyes open for the other 3 issues here. So, and of course, Aragones, even just looking at those pages, just the density of those pages and apparently how fast he draws. It's impressive to see. Everyone sucks Usagi's dick too much. I'm in the minority. Well, I mean, it's not a bad thing to be in the minority if we're talking about bestiality, but yeah, I mean, I hear that, Chris, but I mean, I think people jump on the D quite a bit because it's just a good book. And if it's not for you, that's totally cool, but I think it's a great book. I think it's a lot of fun. But yes, people do praise it. It's pretty rare that you hear someone shitting on Usagi. What should we go to next? Why don't we do this Viz stuff? Yeah, we were talking about that just before you came in. I was mentioning that stream. I caught some of that stream today. I didn't catch the whole thing. So Viz Comics, still going today, still putting stuff out. Part of the Lone Star Order was getting these final 2 issues from Volume 1 of the book Sanctuary. Story by Sho Fumamiru, art by Ryoichi Ikigami. Ryoichi Ikigami was a focus of an episode of the show Manben. If you don't know Manben, it's a show that every episode focus on a different mangaka and kind of goes into their studio. They put cameras in their studio and watch them create and watch their process. And then they invite that artist to sit and go through that footage and kind of comment on things. The episode with Ryoichi Ikigami is a pretty stellar episode. You get a sense of where they're coming from or where he's coming from when he was creating these books. It took me about 2 pages to get back into Sanctuary and realize that it's a book that I love, and I can't wait to read more of it. The basic premise is these two friends who have grown up together and experienced all sort of poverty and all sort of kind of child labor, have decided that they're going to change Japan between the two of them. It's basically a rock, paper, scissors as who's going to go into politics and who's going to go into the Yakuza. And each of them are going to climb the ranks in those particular organizations so they can kind of gain the power and lead Japan into a new era of prosperity. And it's just fucking amazing. It's really, really good. There's a lot of good kind of political commentary on here. And like I was saying to Rasa this afternoon, there's for sure some things in here that are going over my head as far as kind of Japanese culture and their history and their place in this particular moment in time. So I'm sure there's things that I'm completely missing out on. But that said, though, there's still a lot here to dig into, especially when it comes to the government and just kind of how power works, I think is pretty great. And then on top of that, you get some stellar images like this page here. The use of that white medium, he's smoking cigars and kind of breathing, blowing the smoke out of his nose, and kind of like that lower angle shot. So you see his full chin and neck there, I think is a really great choice. What a nuisance. There's no need for heroes in government is what he says. He's the current political leader within the party here that they're going to try to overthrow. Just great. Really good stuff. Not much more to say than that. I've talked about it in the past. And again, it's one of those books that I feel like you can find in the cheap bins if you kind of dig for it. Obviously, that depends on your city. If you do find a lot of Viz stuff, I'd say don't pass this one over. Pick up a couple of issues and give it a shot if it's cheap enough. Now I'm on to trying to find volume 2. I think there was 5 volumes maybe, or 6 volumes, might have even been 7 that came out from Viz. Pardon me, I'd be surprised if that's all of the Sanctuary books. I'm curious where it's going to go. This last issue ended on a bit of a cliffhanger. There was these 2 gangsters that were kind of going to kill each other. They ended up kind of befriending each other, and one of them kind of approaches the other and says, you know, hey, if we team up, why don't we get into Hong Kong, and why don't we kind of spread the Yakuza's power into Hong Kong as well? And that's kind of how it's been left. So there's a lot of betrayal that happens. One of the guys ends up killing his boss to kind of prove that, hey, I'm not fucking around, actually. This is my boss, and I'm going to slit his throat, and that's it. And I'm going to show that I'm committed to everything that I've told you. So really good stuff. Very, very good storytelling. Very enjoyable. So if any of that sounds appealing, dig for some Sanctuary. And I mean, absolutely dig into some Man Ben. I think it's a really entertaining show to get a bit of insight into some creators you know and a ton of creators that you don't know. Sticking with the Viz right here. Sad to say that one of the Viz series that didn't last any longer, even though the story itself kept going, was this Lycanthrope Leo. Issue number 7 is the final one within this, I guess, what was going to be the first chapter. I think that the book continued in Japanese, but I don't think it continued. I couldn't find anything about it continuing in English anyway. And there's your creators there, Kengo Kaji, and art by Kenji Okamura. This one is more kind of just a fun book. The story itself is okay. This kind of lineage of people that are kind of tied to these different shape-shifting animal/human hybrid species. So we just got it kind of introduced to each of the factions and how they interact with each other. Our main characters kind of coming to terms as to being a part of this kind of werewolf clan, when he transformed into a werewolf, he actually killed his own father. So he's coming into terms with all of that. But this one was just kind of a balls out, big fight. Lots of motion lines on every single page. It was just a really fun read. This whole 7-issue series here was just a fun read. I wouldn't say that the storytelling is the best I've ever read, but it doesn't always need to be. Sometimes it's just got to be fun. And look at all that black on the page. Yeah, so this was enjoyable. I don't know if it's highly recommended, but again, if you see it for cheap, I wouldn't pass it up. It's worth looking at. So that's Lycanthrope Leo. And again, continuing with reads, the other one that consistently blows me away, and now I think I'm completely caught up on Guy Davis and his Marquee series. This is a one-shot called A Sin of One that came out in 2003, May of 2003, written and illustrated by Guy Davis, lettered by Vince Locke. They advertise a collection of some of the previous Marquee, this Danse Macabre stuff that came out. There was a couple of one-shots. There was a couple of mini-series that he did from the Marquee. And like I said, I'm pretty sure I've got everything now. And honestly, with this book, anything that you can find, I would, if you're a fan of Guy Davis, this is so worth your time. This particular issue was probably one of the best ones that I've read. It's a bit more violent than the other books, which isn't a criticism. I kind of like that. I also think that this standalone does a really good job. If this was your first issue that you read from the Marquee, this is a really good place to start. It gives you a lot of good backstory as to the world that he's a part of and kind of how the systems are, what systems are in place in this world, what kind of rules this world lives under. It also gives you a lot of good insight into the character itself of the Marquee and kind of his battle with these demons from hell that are possessing people. In our opening here, we have a house kind of maid who's walked in on her master killing his wife and child. And we get this kind of grisly panel here where we can see the bloody mess at the bottom at his feet there. One of the things within this world is if you're a witness to any of this murder, you are brought in front of the Inquisitor. They put this mask on you so you can be kind of deprogrammed, basically, so devils don't take you over as well. And in this particular incident, they don't actually take her to the Inquisitor. They're kind of a separate faction, so they've decided we're not going to do it. The rest of the issue focuses on the Marquee himself and his battle with these demons. Anytime there's a demon that sees him, they don't want him to capture them. They always choose to kill themselves. They embody, they kind of possess the bodies of living people. So they basically cause these humans to commit suicide, and their souls then go to hell. So they're kind of gaining some points for hell. But if the Marquee kills them, he sends them to hell, which of course they don't want. We get some, so every time he is up against one of them, they decide to off themselves first, like in this case, this one slitting its own throat. He finally gets to meet this old woman who's on her deathbed, and she knows everything about him. And when he asks, who is telling you all this stuff, she reveals that the lower half of her is currently possessed by one of these demons and is kind of telling her all these stories and trying to get her to kill herself. But she has this resolve that she's not listening to those voices. She's not going to go through with it. She's been waiting for him to show up. And then we get this little transformation and fight scene. So good. Guy Davis's style is just wild, scratchy and messy and just full of life. I personally think this is a style that works very, very well for me. So can't recommend this book enough. Every time I've read this and talked about it on the channel, it comes highly recommended. So I'm really gonna have to dig through the last issues and see if I'm missing anything. It's one of those. It's also one of those books. If I ever came across the collected editions, it would be an easy purchase. I'd double dip on that in a heartbeat. And it also makes me really want to get into the Guy Davis stuff that he did in the Hellboy universe, the BPRD stuff. But I'm just having a problem finding volume 1 of that book. I've seen some random other volumes in for cheap in some places, but I'm just not finding volume 1. And that's one I want to read from the beginning. I know it's not necessary. That was another discussion that For the Love of Comics had on his channel today. I get that it's not necessary, but that's just my preference of reading some of this stuff. A lot of it, yeah, you can absolutely jump in wherever and you can pick it up because it's really not that big of a deal. But there's some things, again, I like to read it in order. I like to kind of follow it from the beginning. And I feel like that's one of those. That's not necessarily, it's not maybe necessary, but maybe makes it a little more enjoyable. The Jam, Bernie Moreau's The Jam from Matrix Graphics. Matrix Graphics series is this 80s, 1987 Canadian Bernie Moreau. Talked about The Jam on the channel before as well. This one shot collects some short stories that appeared in other places. I think all of them I've read previously. It was still great to sit and read this again. And another comic and another guy that I wish he would have done more. It's a character that I've always heard about, and I always kind of acknowledged that he was there and that he existed, but it didn't really appeal to me all the time. But as kind of my tastes change and I grow, I guess, or get older rather, and start trying to grasp onto things from the past a little harder, this style really appeals to me, and it's a really, really fun book. So this was a great kind of reintroduction to the character and the world. I'd like to, the plan is to write something about The Jam, and it'll appear in some sort of publication somewhere at some time. So I'm going to pull out all these issues that I have. Again, it's another one where I think I've got everything now, Jam related. I might be missing one kind of color one shot or something, but I'm pretty sure I've got everything. So it'll be nice to sit and read everything again and put some thoughts down about the book. Really, really good. Another guy whose style works for me now a lot. Yeah, let's do these two. Not much to say about this next one. It's issue 2. It's a book that we talked about because Vortex did Badlands, and then it got reintroduced by Dark Horse. I think I don't remember if the Vortex one was only 4 issues and it didn't finish the story, and this Dark Horse one completed it, pardon me, or if the Vortex series actually published everything and then Dark Horse just picked it up. Our main character is this ex-con who's just got out of prison. The usual ex-con trying to reintegrate himself back into the real world, ends up getting involved in kind of crime again to some degree, working for a gangster who's starting to also get into politics. His mission is basically to just protect his daughter. He's kind of a bodyguard for the daughter, as all these guys are around trying to fuck her. So it's a lot of him beating the shit out of dudes. But this issue gives you a little more of the political and gangster kind of leanings. There's a theme here in some of these books that I end up enjoying: crime and politics. So a good issue with a surprising kind of ending. Not what I was expecting at the end. It also doesn't shy away from some of the kind of violent nature within sex, and especially within this guy and in his kind of relationship with women, especially. He doesn't really have, being in prison for so long, he's got a very specific feel about sex, the act of sex, and how it should take place. And that happens with women in this outside world. This particular woman happens to enjoy it, but he's really crossed a line now with this gangster's daughter that he can't turn back from, and it's obviously going to have repercussions in future issues. But it's a good book though, man. Badlands, not an easy one to find out there, but another one I'd suggest checking out. Did I show the Stephen Grant writing and Vince Giordano on art is the credits there at the top. Single issue of Dave Cooper's The Power from Aircel Comics, 1990s, I think is when this was. April of 1991. And of all this era of the Dave Cooper stuff that I've kind of gathered over the past year or so, this is probably the weakest out of the stuff. This is the one that, for me personally, I don't know if I would recommend unless you're like me and kind of want to get everything Dave Cooper, then absolutely go for it. But if you're just kind of a casual fan, there's much better stuff that he's done in this era that I would kind of suggest trying instead of this. What was that one character's name? I'll figure it out and it'll pop into my head, I'm sure, as we're talking. But this one, a group of teenagers, they get some superpowers. Like I said, I think I said this was issue number 2 from a 4-issue miniseries. And it's just them kind of dealing with those powers, and are they going to do it to do good in the world, or like some of their friends, are they going to turn into supervillains? So really not interesting story-wise. His art is pretty wild. He's getting more to be kind of the Dave Cooper that we know, but he's still in those early stages of his art style that's just kind of just bizarre looking. Yeah, very, very strange looking, and unusual body types on these, in this case, women. It must be really cold where they are, because all of them have nipples a mile long. But stuff like this that's classic Dave Cooper. Like, that's such a bizarre looking body. The way the feet are coming at you there, filling up that panel with that die. Really kind of wild stuff. But Jake Thrash is the book that I'm thinking of. If you want to try some early Dave Cooper, check out Jake Thrash. That's a really good book, in kind of my opinion. But this one is kind of a pass. I'll end up getting the other issues because that's just how I am. But I'm not going to go out of my way to hunt them down too much either. One I will be trying to hunt down some more. This was a Free Comic Book Day version of a book from Comics Tribe, who's a company I've never heard of before. And then Emily was gone. So it's kind of a split. There's 2 stories in here. The second one involves this stupid looking fucking character here that I didn't read at all because it just didn't appeal to me. The draw on this one, though, is the artist Ian Laurie, who I found on Instagram and is still around doing stuff. The most recent stuff that I've seen on his Instagram page, it was a lot of kind of pinups of Batman and Robin. I don't know if he got into the variant cover game for 30 seconds or not, but he's definitely still around and active, and his style is really great. It sort of falls in that Ian Bertram kind of world. I feel like there's a bunch of artists that sort of, even though their styles aren't identical, I feel like there's some similarities in the way they draw people and the way they, I don't know, just their uniqueness sort of has it feels like they sort of lived in the same city. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like they've had a bunch of the same influences and have come to a pretty similar end result with their own style. This one has some good creepy elements, just like the other short story that I read that Ian did the art for, which I'm blanking on the name of right now. He's kind of telling his parents that he keeps seeing this person, at first this person or this creature outside of his bedroom window when he's sleeping at night. and the parents kind of brush it off and say, hey, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Of course, we get closer to the end of this story, and the parents know full well what is going on. And I think they say something like, "This another child we're just going to have to say goodbye to." So it's sort of a teaser into what the story is potentially about. It gives you a good kind of nugget, leaves you with some excellent questions, more than enough questions to want to dig further. And it's stuff like this that I'm here for. The story has a good kind of creepy vibe to it, but this is why I'm here in this book. I love this art. I think it's really kind of grotesquely beautiful. There's something about it. The coloring obviously helps as well. Let's see, is it Ian doing the coloring as well too? No, Megan Wilson on colors. Let's do the full credits there. So John Lees on the story, Ian Laurie on the art, Ryan Stegman cover, Megan Wilson colors, and Colin Bell letter. None of those names mean anything to me, but there you have it. So that's the Free Comic Book Day version of And Then Emily Was Gone. And this came out in 2015 is when this free comic came out. So again, it was another one from like the 50 cent or the dollar bin from 204 Comics. I've got it on my wish list on Lone Star, and I've had it there for quite a while too. So nice to find one in the wild. Yeah, so I guess we leave with these. Looks like just a few more to go here. Boy Wonder, from that to Boy Wonder issue number 3, that for some reason is being put out by Black Label. And especially after reading this 3rd issue, I have no fucking idea why this is a Black Label book. Maybe I'm dense. Created, so written and drawn by Junie Ba, colored by Chris O'Halloran. This one really feels like a YA story where it's a good opportunity to talk to your kids about what kind of person they can grow into and the challenges that they're going to face in life and the choices that you're going to make through life, which maybe is too far off from superhero comics in general. But this one, especially because it's Black Label, I guess I just assume that it's going to be more adult content. And it just isn't that. It's still an enjoyable read. And again, it's one of those books where I like the art way more than I'm interested in the story. The story, again, as usual, is passable. It gets me from page to page. It moves me through the page. But I do like Junie Ba's art, and I think the coloring is really nice on this as well too. So it's fun, and I'll be sticking around because I don't know how many issues are left, but I'm pretty sure it's almost done. One, or is it is it one more issue, or is there going to be 6 total? Either way, we'll find out. And the character of Damian is appealing, having the parents that he has, having the relation with Ra's al Ghul, I think is going to be appealing. And the way he was kind of taught to deal with things, as opposed to the way that Batman is going to tell you to deal with things. This really reminds me of something out of Samurai Jack that feels like it's right out of his world there. So some beautiful artwork in this. And that's the main reason I would say to pick it up. If you're interested in the Batman kind of world and want to read yet another story about the struggles of the Batman family, you can't do much worse than that. I just bought the entire Badlands run. Looking forward to reading it. Awesome, Daryl. That's great. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about it. Robin, in a Black Label book, compared to Vertigo's Badlands you showed, it seems anything Black Label is rated G in comparison. Yeah, absolutely. And just as a note, Badlands was Dark Horse, not Vertigo. But yeah, absolutely. That's very much a G book for sure. Like, it's one that I could read with my daughter. There's nothing in it so far that's really been, oh my God, this is so wild. I just don't understand what the purpose of Black Label is, I guess. But again, maybe that's on me. Issue number, no worries there, Gore Vidal. Just want to make sure if you decide to go look for it, you're not looking down the Vertigo path. Precious Metal, issue number 2. just as beefy as the first one, filled with story and art right from the opening pages. No advertisements in this bad boy other than we get the same thing we had at the end of the first issue. We get a black and white preview of the cover for issue number 3. And then we even get some text on the inside back cover. Still a stunner. I still need to dig Little Bird out of the bins and give that a reread to kind of refresh my memory about this universe. I don't know what I can add differently than I didn't already say with the first issue. The coloring is just mind-blowing. I was talking to my son about it, who's really getting into digital coloring lately and kind of exploring the worlds of different brushes and textures you can do with coloring. So we had a good conversation. I haven't sat with him and showed him this book up close, which I'm hoping to do this weekend when he's over. Just to kind of get his thoughts on it as someone who knows that much more about digital coloring than I do, which is for myself zero, other than you click a button, I think. But it's a beautiful book. It's a very imaginative world. Ian Bertram, Darcy Van Polgeest is the artist, and then Matt Hollingsworth is on colors. And it really is, I would love to see this in black and white because I love Ian Bertram. But that is not in any way, shape, or form a diss on Hollingsworth colors, because his colors in this are just stellar. This is a top read so far of the year. Easily going to be one of the best reads of the year. The story, yeah, it's absolutely confusing. Yes, there's parts that I totally don't understand for sure. It's not hurting my enjoyment of the book in the slightest. If anything, it makes me want to read more. Like I said, it makes me want to go back and reread Little Bird. It also makes me crave more stories within this universe because it does feel like it's a universe that the more stories we get, the more fleshed out it's going to be. So I'm okay with having some of those unknowns. And I also, again, I love when kind of the styles change into this kind of thing, like incorporating these kind of cubes and different textures and different kind of shapes on a page. We go, especially when we transition from these pages. The first issue had some great transitions color-wise. This one has some great transitions, just kind of the use of shapes and textures. That's a pretty good example of that there, how it moves throughout the book. And as Rasa was talking about today, there's just something really appealing about his characters. It's a very stylized kind of caricature of people, but I find it works really well. It kind of gives him his signature style, just like these noodly kind of things I would say are very much Ian Bertram and have appeared in every book that he's done. He always has these kind of noodly, blood-filled things invading the page. So really, really great stuff. Yeah, there is something about how he draws eyes for sure, Gore. Absolutely. Strong book. If you, and I think, again, because I do feel like you can get into this one, don't let it bother you that you're confused. Just kind of go with it. Get into the feel of the universe. And if anything about it appeals to you, then you can always go and find Little Bird. But honestly, I would, if you're the least bit interested in it, I might suggest you jump on that because I feel like it's one of those books that's gaining a little steam. I know Rasa had a hard time getting issue number. Well, she couldn't get issue number 1. She's having a hard time getting issue number 2. So I would say that if it's something and you have a shop around you, that I'd suggest maybe going down to grab it. And finally for tonight, we'll do a little bit of a look into one of my all-time favorites, and I will inundate you with things that I've said about this series a million times, and you'll like it. The Storyteller, Jim Henson's The Storyteller. This is the Giants 4-issue miniseries. It was the one that I didn't have it was the only miniseries from the Storyteller line that I didn't have a single issue from. And it's now that I've read all 4, I would also say that out of all the Storyteller books, I would say that this one shouldn't be the first one that you go to. Any of the other ones, try them out. I would say that this is probably the weakest of the Storyteller miniseries. It was still good. There was some really good stories. This issue was a nice one, and this final issue was beautiful for the art, which I'll show you in a second. But this was probably my least favorite of the Storyteller runs that I've read, and I've read like 97% of them. This final issue I thought was beautiful, and again, it was more about the illustration. You saw it as the image that used for this stream here, but pardon me, beautiful style by Feifei Ruan, I think. So as I've said before, every single issue within Storyteller is a new creator that takes on the role of writing and art, and they get to tell a story within a theme. So there's a mini series that's fairies. There's a mini series that's witches. Like we're looking at here. There's giants. There's dragons. There's ghosts. All sorts of things. So each 4-issue mini series has a theme, and then the creator gets to write a story within that. And it's kind of folk tales is the general framework that they're using to tell these stories. Not horrible, not the best one though. Now on the flip side, a couple of other ones that I read, an issue from Ghosts and an issue from Dragons, which I'm still missing one issue from each actually. So I'm almost there in my complete Storyteller run. I can't remember. It might have been in the stream where I was showing these off. There are collections of these as well too. Dragons. This issue of Dragons was pretty good. There was a I'm gonna blank on her name though. Julia Grofer, I think is her name. There was a kind of style here that was reminiscent of her art style. This was a pretty good tale. This kind of warrior woman and her young steward, I guess, or her young kind of servant who doesn't want to be a servant, who wants to prove herself to this person that she sort of looks up to when it comes to battling this dragon. And we just get a nice story of this kind of teamwork. Again, it's a good Black Label story on how to be a good team player. But beautiful art though. This is Hannah Christensen doing the story and art in this one. But the one that kind of really encompasses a lot of what I like about this Storyteller stuff was this issue of Ghosts. It had a really nice story from this kid's perspective, and his family. His mother has died. His father works in a coal mine and has to go off for work for a couple of months. He's staying with his grandma, and he's just got a fear that he's going to lose his father. He's got a fear that he's going to be alone, and he's experiencing there's this ghost, or there's this almost witch-like figure in the woods that he keeps seeing and kind of is drawn towards. So he's trying to face his fears, and it's just not working out so well for him. And it's one of those stories that has a real kind of touching ending to it, which has happened a few times within the Storyteller series. There's been these issues that just kind of capture something that I love about this type of storytelling, something that we can kind of all relate to, and somehow turn a comic into just a nice, touching story where you feel a little emotion and you feel for the characters in it, even though they're just these drawings on a page. So this was probably the best read out of all the Storyteller stuff. Yeah, just kind of moving, a little bit sad, and beautiful art as usual. Michael Walsh was the artist and writer on that particular issue of Ghosts. And I think with that is about it. I wish Natalie Portman was a team player. Yeah, absolutely. And Monica Bellucci. Salma Hayek. I would say Salma Hayek and Monica Bellucci. I wish they were team players, Gore. That's it. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll be back next week for a chat. I'm hoping to dig into the newest Dynamite Diva this week, but I start work this week, so we'll see if that ends up happening. I found a few more issues of Hard Looks as well. that I want to dive into. I think Gore, you said that you got this whole series of Hard Looks, right? Have you read the whole thing yet? Curious to hear your thoughts on it. I don't know if you're still going to be doing videos these days, but if you are, I'd love to hear what you think of Hard Looks. Thanks very much, everybody else, for hanging out. It's always good to see you every week. An hour and 15 minutes. Holy shit. Time for bed, everybody. Good night, and God bless. All right, later.